I'm a boat builder from the Cotswolds in the UK, and I'm currently building a boat called Temptress, designed by Michelle Berrier and kitted by myself to be built utilising the latest in CAD design, CNC cutting and modern epoxy wood construction. In this video, I am starting to get the boat set up downstairs. I've been building components for weeks now, and now we're going to actually turn it into something that looks vaguely boat shaped. So it's a pretty cool stage to be getting to. We're going to start out by clearing a bit of extra space in the workshop to make room to fit this thing in here, and then I'm building the strongback. I'll show you how I get all that straightened out and aligned, perfectly accurate, and then we're going to stand up the first few handful of components. So we've got 4 frames here and the stem as well, so we're going to be putting some legs on those, get the parts in. I'll show you how the process works if you're new, and if you aren't new, I'm sure you've been waiting to see this for a long time. So let's get cracking with the strongback. Okay, so the 2 strongback rails are laid up so we can see the full length, the full extent of this beast. It's probably going to end about there forward, I think, and that gives me the room to get behind the boat at the back. Next job is a little bit of housekeeping, so I want to try and make enough space so that I can actually work physically around the boat. So I've got this workbench here, and to be honest, this is one of those kind of benches that it's constantly just got crap on it, really. So it's a bit of a space that gets filled just because it's here. So what I think I'm going to do is actually cut this back to the posts. Cut that straight down. So I've got a little shelf here so that I can still keep my sanding discs and stuff. There's a supercharger there, by the way. So this is going on missile next summer to wake the boat up a little bit. That'll be a bit of fun, but that's an aside. So I'm going to get rid of these cupboards underneath. Again, these are just like storage for stuff that doesn't really need to be there. Samples for when we still used to actually make shelves that have just been sat there for years. So I'm going to chop that back, get myself enough room to hopefully walk up the boat along this side and feasibly work by it. I may move the drill press if needed. I'll see how that goes, because the boat's actually going to narrow obviously at the transom. My main workbench is going to go as well so that I can work around there, because I've actually got a workbench in the back room, and I've got the MFT table upstairs up about here, which I can use as a full-size workbench as well. So I don't really need 3 of those. I'm only a one-man band. The wood shredder sits here, which feeds into the extraction system and then gets pressed into those little wood briquettes that you might have seen in the machine that sits under here. Again, the wood shredder, I hardly ever use it. So I'm going to sell that. I think that's going to put a little bit of extra money into the pot to fund the boat, which will be helpful, and I'll get rid of it and gain some space. So that's the next plan, make a little bit more room. So the strongback is assembled. Obviously I've used CNC cut parts to get me this far. Now what the strongback's done is it's got me the spacing of all the rungs, all of these perfectly spaced, and I've just done some spot checks on various different parts, and even over the longest span that I can get on a tape measure, I'm within a millimetre accuracy, which is really nice to know that my machine is holding that accuracy over these longer cuts and inclusive of these dovetail joints and things. So it's got me the spacing of the rungs with incredible accuracy. It's got me those rungs parallel to each other, so I know that all the frames are going to be vertical and in the correct plane, with the exception of course of frame 9, which is on an angle. And I did have a little bit of a wobble when I first looked at that, and I said to myself, why is frame 9 leaning forwards? I then realised that the boat's going to be built upside down, so had a little wobble there, but we're okay. So it's got me the correct spacing, it's got me everything vertical, and when we fire the laser through the boat, we'll get everything at the correct height. So the next critical thing to get right with this strongback is to make sure that everything's square, so we don't want this whole assembly doing this, and also that it's dead straight. So we've got to get these longitudinal pieces straight and make sure that everything's square. Those are the two primary things to next dial in with this, because any inaccuracy at this stage is going to reflect with an inaccuracy of placing the frame, which is then going to create an unfair hull, and that whole inaccuracy is just going to knock on down through the project. So accuracy right now at this stage of the project is imperative. This is going to set me up for the entire rest of the build and make things flow, so we need to get this perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ping some string lines down the length of these, and I'm going to start getting this nice and true. So let's get cracking with that. Okay, so I have my string lines set up. So I've got one on either side of the strongback, and you'll note I've got these little posts clamped in place. And if you look at the way that I've brought the string around, I've made sure that it's flush with this face. So these strings should be right up against the inner face of the strongback there. I've got this little post in here against this rung so that I can put a load of tension on this. There's quite a bit of tension on this string to keep it nice and straight and true, and that's just going to stop that post from slipping. Got a little cleat on the back side of it there just so I can pull it up tight and tie it off, and then it runs down to a post at the other end. I've marked a uniform height above the face of the strongback there, and I've just cut a little notch in that corner so that what I can do with this string is just roll it down and just knock it into that notch there, so I just know that this isn't going to slip around and move whilst I'm making adjustments and checks. So the string's going to allow me to do a couple of things. It's going to allow me to check that it's straight, so what I'll be able to do is put a straight edge up the inside here and see if I'm missing or touching the string, and get each of these kind of, you know, I'll be able to just knock these over ever so slightly and make adjustments and get them set in place, hopefully to quite an accurate degree. It's also going to allow me to check that the strongback is level. Now this isn't really crucial with regards to setting up the frames, because we're going to do the frames, they're going to float in each of these rungs on a laser level system. So the top face of the strongback doesn't really have to be level, but what we don't want is for it to be deviating too much, because although it's not going to affect us in this kind of plane, if you imagine it, if say the forward end of this strongback's rolling off in this kind of direction, it's going to mean that these rungs are no longer vertical. They're going to start to then probably lean forwards. Obviously this is on a tiny scale, but it's all going to have an effect. And as you can see, this is floating around here. We have got that roll off effect there. You can see the big crack in my floor there. And I now, since setting this up, know that my floor actually rolls away here towards the door. So I want to try and get that a little bit better than it currently is. And you can see that if we sight down that string line, it gets a little bit smaller. The gap from here to the top of the strongback gets a little bit smaller in the middle, and as I lift this up, you might be able to see, I don't know if I can pick that up on camera, but we can get that strongback a little bit more uniform down the full length of it. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start to shim this up here. You could potentially scribe the bottom edge of the strongback and fit it down to the floor, but that's also going to mean me cutting all the rungs. I'm going to have to get all this up on its side. That's quite major work. So I think what I'm actually going to do is shim this and just get it up to where it needs to be, and try and get a little bit closer that way. So that's the next thing to do really, is to get that top edge a little bit straighter. As I said, doesn't have to be perfect, but I do want to take out the possible effect of the strongback rolling off forward and then affecting how vertical these rungs are. So that's the next job. Okay, so I'm getting the strongback bonded down now, and I've started by gluing the transom rung to the floor, and then I'm moving forward 2 rungs at a time and just getting this perfectly straightened out. The primary focus of what I'm trying to do at the moment is to get this dead straight. So I've taken the deflection out of the strongback in this direction by shimming up the forward end. Now I'm aiming to get things square in this kind of plane, and also get the two main runs dead straight as well. So I'm using these squaring blocks that you see here, and I'm shifting them through the area as I work through. Also checking with a square on each of the individual rungs. But I'm using these string lines right now to get these outer edges perfectly square, and actually I'm quite amazed by the amount of accuracy that I'm able to do this too, and I'll show you how I do it. So I've got this string set up so that the inside edge of this string is parallel to the inside face of the strongback, and that means that at each of these stations I can come along with a square, and I can place that edge against the inner face of the strongback, and I can just roll it back in and then see how far I'm missing the string. So I'm missing the string on this side probably by around about 2 millimeters at this point. We'll jump over to the other side, and you can see that as I bring that square up, I'm ever so slightly deflecting that string there, and you can just see that string move. So I'm just going to put my square in place, and then I'm going to tap it until I see it just release from that string. Okay, so now you can see that as I nudge that square up, that's not deflecting that string anymore. It's just a hair's gap in between that and the face. So then I'm going to go back to the other side. And check that I've got the same thing over here. And I have. Maybe just go one knock back that way. So that's what I'm doing. I'm working my way all the way up through the strongback, just balancing each individual rung as I go. And I can jump back to the other rungs as well and just check them, but you can very quickly just put that square in place, and if you see the string move and deviate as you draw that square in, you know that you're a little bit out. So I'm really pleased with that. That's got to be getting me an accuracy of less than a millimeter, which is really, over something of this kind of span, couldn't ask for better than that. That's really going to tie in well to the CNC cut frames that we're going to plant into this in a little bit. So I'll carry on with that. We'll get the rest of the thing bonded down. Okay, so that is the strongback done. Happy with the placement of everything there. We've got extreme accuracy, nice straight runs down here, which I'm really happy with. Everything's filleted, bonded down to the floor now, so we've got huge amount of rigidity in this. No movement whatsoever. There's a little bit of filleting still to do. I'm going to run some fillets down this outer edge as well, and I'm going to make sure that both sides of the center of the rungs are done. I've just done one side so far, and I'm also going to fillet up these corners here just to take any movement out of that. Okay, so I'm ready to start putting the legs on frame number 5. This is the first of the open frames within the boat. So we're back up on the construction table here. The holes that you will see through this frame serve a number of functions. If you're new to the series, then I highly recommend dropping back and watching some of the videos on frame building where you see these holes utilized on this table before. So these holes allow me to position the individual frame parts initially whilst I'm building the frame here and keeping it true and square, but they also serve two other functions as well. So these holes then allow me to position and reference that frame on the CNC machine downstairs when this frame goes onto the machine to be beveled and all the notches, cutting it post assembly. These holes also allow me to then relocate this frame back on this table again and pick up the waterline and the center lines, which is what I'm going to do next when I put the legs on. They also allow me to position the legs. So we'll use these holes again. We're going to knock the dowel through there and position this back into its location on the board. Now I only really need a few dowels in this just to get it square and in the correct place. So I'm going to do those two in the chine and the two up on the deck line. So the next thing I need to do is to pick up the width of the strongback, and that is done using these bench dogs, and they go into these holes marked strongback leg 2 to 13. So we'll screw those into place, and we've got one of those top and bottom of the table. Okay, then I get some leg stock, which is just 4-inch wide ripped strips of MDF. So that butts up against the outer face, the inner face of those two bench dogs, and that makes sure that that leg is perfectly vertical and at the correct width as well for this frame. So we'll slide that down and then we can screw that in place. Okay, so for this frame we also need a cross member that's going to keep the top sections of the frame, the sides and the deck beams correctly spaced, stop those from spreading, but also to support the bottom end of these legs so that things are all going to be in the correct plane. So this is going to go over the top face of the leg, and then we're going to need some spacers. So because we've got to account for the thickness of the leg, we need a spacer there to get us back down to that, and then because we've got the thickness of the bulkhead, we need a spacer for that. So under each of these I'm going to go with a 12mm plywood spacer and an 18mm MDF spacer. Pop that under there. Then I just need to transpose waterline 1 onto those legs, which is going to be my height reference plane all the way throughout the boat. So a couple more bench dogs go into the line for waterline 1. Put a straight edge up against those bench dogs, and then I can transpose that line onto my frame leg. So there's just one more addition that I want to make to the way that these legs are done, and that's that I'm going to position the legs at right angles to each other. So instead of just being flat pieces of timber, I'm going to put a second piece on the outer face of the leg and turn it into a right angle. So that's going to make it infinitely more rigid than it is at the moment. You can see there's plenty of flex in that leg, and that's going to cause this frame to wobble around, which we don't want to do. So I'm going to put that at 90 degrees to that. That's also going to allow me to put some diagonal members within the strongback system, which you'll see a little bit later on. So let's get this in place. Okay, so that's frame 5 done. Cross member put in, spaced off the frame to make sure that the legs are perpendicular to the bulkhead, which is the control frame face for this frame. Same as the forward face of the legs, which will also sit on the rung down in the strongback. And we've got our right angle pieces in there to make sure that these legs stay nice and straight and vertical. So that's ready to get in the boat. Let's get it downstairs. So there we go, that's the first 4 frames stood up, 1, 2, 3 and 5. I've still got to do some work on 4 before we can get the legs on that and get that into place. Got the stem in there as well, and initial thoughts, looking really good. Having those right angles on the legs really helps just to position those, and they're so much more rigid than they would otherwise be. And also put some diagonal bracing in, that's just going to take it to the next level. So yeah, cool stage to be getting to. Nice to have this bonded down into place and be starting to get this to look like a boat. That's as far as I'm going to take it for this video. I was hoping to get all the frames set up, but I'm afraid just extra time with getting the strongback shimmed and the slight redecoration that I had to do with the workshop to make some extra space has pushed me on a little bit. But we'll crack on. In the next video, I'm going to be getting all of the frames set up. I've still got some stuff to bevel for the frames, so not all of those are done on the CNC yet. Got to do some more beveling. I've got to put legs on all the frames, so there's a fair bit of work to do still before I can get all the rest of them in the strongback, but we'll crack on with that in the next video. As always, massive thank you to the patrons that are offering additional support to help me try and fund this project. I really appreciate the little extra that you can put in. And if you're just watching the videos, I also massively appreciate that as well, because without you guys watching, this is just me messing around in a shed on my own building boats. So it's great to have you all along here, and I really enjoy reading all the comments as well. It's really great to see. So thank you for watching this one. Please stick around with the channel, and I will see you in a couple of weeks in the next episode when we're going to get the whole thing set up. That's going to be a cool stage. Cheers, guys.